Have you ever wondered why some women live alone? No boyfriend, no partner, not even looking for one. Not because they're heartbroken. Not because they've given up. And definitely not because they can't find a man. What if the real reason has nothing to do with lack and everything to do with power? You see, when a woman chooses solitude, the world often assumes something went wrong, that she must be broken cold or incomplete. But what if that's just projection? A collective discomfort with the idea of a woman who no longer defines herself by romance. This isn't about giving up on love. It's about no longer settling for anything less than truth. Carl Jung once said that everything we deny in ourselves becomes part of the shadow. And in a way, the women who walk alone are often reflecting back something society refuses to face: the strength of emotional independence, the courage of inner wholeness, and the radical idea that fulfillment can exist without external validation. We were taught that a woman's story isn't complete until someone chooses her. But what if the real story begins the moment she chooses herself? In this video, we're going to explore why more and more women are stepping away from relationships, not out of pain, but out of clarity. This is about reclaiming space, rewriting old narratives, and walking a path that isn't loud, but is deeply powerful. So before you judge or assume, pause. Ask yourself, what kind of freedom scares the world so much that it has to label it loneliness? Because sometimes walking alone is the most honest thing a woman can do. Let's get one thing straight: just because a woman is alone doesn't mean she's lonely. Just because she walks through life without a partner doesn't mean she's bitter cold or emotionally damaged. No, what you're seeing is not detachment, it's clarity. It's peace. You see, most people don't understand what it means to give and give, only to be met with silence, apathy, or one-sided love. To constantly burn with hope, effort, attention, only for others to never feel the warmth. That kind of experience doesn't just hurt. It exhausts the soul. So when a woman chooses distance, when she chooses solitude, it's often after years, sometimes decades, of emotional overfunctioning. She was the one who texted first, who remembered birthdays, who gave second chances that were never earned. And eventually, she stopped. Not because she stopped caring, but because she realized her energy was sacred and she was giving it to people who never saw its value. This isn't coldness, it's recovery. But here's the thing: society doesn't like women who no longer ask for approval. Especially women who stop apologizing for existing on their own terms. There's something deeply unsettling, even threatening, about a woman who doesn't need saving. Because, let's be honest, we've all been conditioned quietly, consistently, to believe that a woman's worth is tied to who wants her. That her life is incomplete without a ring, a title, a romantic storyline. And when she walks away from all of that, not out of bitterness, but because she finally knows her worth, it rattles the old system, especially for men who were raised to feel powerful when they're needed. What happens when she doesn't need him? When she doesn't play the damsel or perform gratitude for basic decency? Some call her too independent. Others say she's intimidating. But what if she's just clear? What if she's finally protecting what no one else protected: her time, her energy, her emotional peace? Carl Jung once said that everything we reject or repress becomes part of our unconscious shadow. And society has long rejected the woman who refuses to play the expected role. The quiet wife, the patient girlfriend, the grateful, nurturing better half. But what if that rejection is just fear in disguise? What if we fear what we don't understand, and what we don't understand is how a woman can be fully whole without being someone's other? Let me ask you this: have you ever been around a woman who doesn't flinch in silence? who doesn't chase after validation, who listens more than she speaks, not because she's timid, but because she's listening deeply to herself, not just to others. That presence, that kind of grounded, untethered energy, it can be deeply magnetic. But it can also be terrifying, especially for those who are still searching outside themselves for completeness. Because when a woman no longer burns for others, when she no longer sets herself on fire just to keep someone else warm, she becomes something rare. She becomes a mirror. And mirrors don't lie. They reflect back everything: our neediness, our assumptions, our fears of not being enough without someone. And some people can't handle that reflection, so they call her names: cold, arrogant, emotionally unavailable. But the truth is, they're just uncomfortable. Not with her, but with the version of themselves they see when she refuses to shrink. She didn't ask to be your savior. She didn't come to fulfill a script. She simply chose to stop giving what wasn't being valued. And in a world that teaches women to be soft, compliant, and endlessly forgiving, her boundary becomes rebellion. But maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what's needed. Because no one should be punished for choosing themselves. And yet she is. But here's the twist: the judgment no longer hurts. Not like it used to. Because once you've spent enough time saving everyone but yourself, you stop looking for applause. You stop explaining your solitude like it's something to be pitied. You stop seeing yourself as a problem to be solved. And instead, you become a sanctuary. Not just for yourself, but for every other woman watching. Wondering if maybe she's not broken either. Maybe she's just done burning for people who never brought their own match. And in that quiet space of sovereignty, something powerful is born. Not loneliness, not resentment, but peace. And peace is not something the world gives you. It's something you claim after you've stopped giving your fire to those who only ever wanted the light, but never stayed to tend the flame. Carl Jung once said, "Everything we deny in ourselves becomes part of the shadow." That quote alone could explain why society reacts so strongly to a woman who walks alone, not in bitterness, but in wholeness. You see these women, the ones who choose solitude, who speak softly but stand firmly, who no longer chase love just to feel worthy, are more than just outliers. They are mirrors. They reflect what most people suppress. Their lives disrupt the script we've all been handed, especially women. Be sweet, be chosen, be needed, but never ever be whole without permission. And when someone shatters that narrative, not with rebellion, but with quiet truth, it makes people uncomfortable. Why? Because they've spent so long denying that same truth in themselves. That's the collective shadow Jung talked about. The parts of us that society doesn't want to acknowledge. So it labels them as wrong, cold, unfeminine, dangerous. But look closer and you'll realize something fascinating. The woman who lives alone, who walks her own path, who no longer needs applause to validate her presence, isn't lacking. She's glowing. She's not waiting to be saved. She's already done the saving. And that kind of clarity, it scares people, because it points to a question many secretly ask in the quiet of night. What if I stopped pretending? What if I stopped performing, stopped seeking, stopped shrinking? What would happen if I simply was? You see, many people admire women like this, but only from a distance. They call her empowered, strong, even brave. But the moment her choices challenge their comfort zones, the admiration turns to judgment. Because deep down, she represents what so many wish they had the courage to become. She chose herself. She chose stillness in a world addicted to noise. She chose healing over chasing. She chose presence over performance. And in doing so, she exposed a silent truth. Many people are in relationships, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of sitting in silence. Fear of facing the parts of themselves they've buried. But this woman, she faced them. She walked straight into the storm of her own shadow. She confronted her wounds, her fears, her patterns. And she didn't run. She integrated. And integration, Jung says, is the path to becoming whole. Not perfect, not above emotion, but real, rooted, awake. That's why she doesn't play games anymore. She's not seduced by charm without character. She's not interested in half connections or romantic auditions. She doesn't need to be needed. And that is unsettling to those who've built their worth on being someone else's reason for living. Think about that. In a society that profits off insecurity, selling you love, beauty, success, all wrapped in fear, what happens when a woman no longer buys it? What happens when she walks away from the performance? She becomes dangerous. Not in the destructive sense, but in the revolutionary one. Because her presence alone challenges the systems that depend on her staying small. She no longer sacrifices herself for acceptance. She no longer overfunctions to be enough. She no longer wears masks to survive. And the world doesn't quite know what to do with that. Because when a woman embodies her full self shadow and all, she's not just living her truth. She's shining a light on everyone else's shadow. And most people aren't ready to look. So they judge. They label. They retreat. But that doesn't stop her. Because she's not living for their comfort anymore. She's living for her wholeness. She is the reminder that you don't need to be chosen to be worthy. That love doesn't have to be earned through pain. That solitude isn't a punishment, it's a path. A path most are afraid to take because it leads inward, not outward. But those who walk it find something the world can never give. Peace. And from that peace they rise. Not above others, but above the systems that once kept them caged. So the next time you see a woman walking alone, not chasing love, not explaining her worth, pause. She's not lost. She's not broken. She's just no longer carrying the weight of a society too afraid to face its own shadow. And in that quiet defiance, she's more whole than most people will ever understand. You know, there's a quiet kind of strength that people rarely talk about. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's the kind of strength that comes after the storm, after the tears, after the betrayal, after the silent nights spent wondering, why wasn't I enough? And that's where her story begins. You see, her choice to live alone wasn't born from a fresh wound. It wasn't some dramatic act of rebellion or the result of one bad relationship. No. Her solitude came from a scar that had time to heal. A scar that once bled, yes, but now serves as a reminder, not of what she lost, but of what she learned. She learned that love, real love, should never make you feel small. She learned that being chosen by someone else means nothing if in the process you have to abandon parts of yourself. And most importantly, she learned the difference between attention and affection, between consistency and convenience. Because for years she confused crumbs for meals. She mistook temporary warmth for long-term safety. And like so many women, she gave her time, her energy, her compassion to people who only knew how to take. At first she called it love, but over time it started to feel more like survival. Have you ever been there? Where you twist yourself into a smaller version just to be digestible, just to be loved. That's not love. That's erasure. And she finally saw it. It wasn't in one dramatic moment. It wasn't some grand epiphany. It was subtle, gradual, like the way pain starts to dull when you stop expecting it to change. like the way silence starts to feel more comforting than words you no longer believe. Her awakening didn't come with a bang. It came through a series of disappointments that stopped breaking her and started building her, and the moment she realized she wasn't hard to love, she was just loving the wrong people, everything changed. She didn't stop believing in love. Let's be clear about that. She still believes in love deeply, maybe more than ever. But she no longer believes in performing for it. She no longer believes in shrinking for it. She no longer believes in suffering just to keep it. Because love, real, grounded, soul-level love, doesn't ask you to dim your light. It doesn't come wrapped in conditions or demand you sacrifice your peace for validation. And so when she chose to be alone, it wasn't because she gave up. It was because she finally understood that being alone is better than being invisible in a relationship. That solitude is better than slow self-destruction masked as romance. That peace is better than pretending. And let me tell you something that might surprise you. She still longs for love. She still dreams of deep connection. She still wants to be held, understood, cherished. But not at the cost of herself. Not anymore. Because she knows the price she paid the first time around. She remembers what it cost her to stay in spaces that didn't honor her presence. So now when love returns, it must come clean. It must come whole. It must meet her where she is not from a place of need, but from a place of mutual respect and emotional maturity. And until that happens, she's not waiting. She's living. She's healing. She's creating a home within herself that no one can evict her from. That's the beauty of this path. It doesn't mean she's cold. It means she's clear. It doesn't mean she's closed. It means she's careful. It doesn't mean she's bitter. It means she has boundaries. Carl Jung once wrote that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a part of the self, but by integration. And that's exactly what she's done. She integrated the pain, the rejection, the shame. She sat with the younger version of herself, the one who begged for love, and told her, "You don't have to beg anymore." She reclaimed her worth not by being chosen by someone else, but by choosing herself again and again. And now she walks with that quiet strength. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything. The kind that radiates from within. So the next time someone says she's alone, she must be sad, pause. Because the truth is, she's not alone. She's with herself. And that for the first time in a long time is more than enough. You know what most people don't understand about emotionally mature women. They're not looking for perfection. They're not even looking for forever. They're looking for presence. Real, unfiltered, steady. Not promises whispered in the heat of the moment. Not dreams projected into the distant future. Just presence. Right here. Right now. Because a woman who has done the work, who has sat with her wounds, faced her patterns, and walked herself home, no longer finds comfort in potential. She's not waiting for someone to become. She's watching for who shows up as they are. You see, when a woman becomes emotionally mature, she doesn't fall for charm. She reads energy. She listens between the lines. She notices how you treat her when no one's watching, how you respond to her silence, not just her words. She's not impressed by someone who shows up once and shines. She's moved by those who show up consistently, even on the quiet days. Especially on the quiet days. And because she's no longer searching for someone to complete her, she becomes a mirror one that reflects not just love, but truth. And truth, my friend, is not always easy to look at. That's why emotionally mature women often trigger two responses in others' admiration and fear. People admire her confidence, her calm, her clarity, but they also fear her standards, her silence, her refusal to settle. Because she sees through things. She sees through people. And when someone's still living in emotional survival mode, when they're used to relationships built on neediness or illusion, her presence feels confronting. Not because she's judging them, but because she's no longer playing small to make them feel big. Let's be honest, emotional maturity can be terrifying for someone who's used to chaos. Because she doesn't argue to be heard. She doesn't beg to be loved. She doesn't chase people who walk away. She simply chooses peace over performance. And peace is something many people say they want, but few know how to hold. So what happens when she walks into a room and doesn't need anything? She draws attention, but not because she's trying to. She's magnetic because she radiates from within. That self-possession, that stillness, it disturbs people who rely on being needed to feel worthy. It shakes those who equate love with being saved. Because here's the truth, she doesn't want to be saved. She wants to be seen. And that requires something deeper than good intentions. It requires emotional presence, depth, courage. It requires someone who's not intimidated by a woman, who can stand on her own. Someone who doesn't mistake her independence for rejection. And let's be real, most people aren't ready for that kind of emotional responsibility. They're used to love as escape. She sees love as expansion. They want someone to fill their emptiness. She wants someone who knows how to sit with their own. And when she doesn't lower her standards to match their fear, she's labeled too much, too intense, or too complicated. But none of that is true. She's just too whole for someone who hasn't met themselves yet. Carl Jung once said that what we resist persists, and what we don't face in ourselves, we project onto others. And that's exactly what happens here. She's not the problem. She's just reflecting the gap between who they are and who they think they are. And instead of rising to meet her, many will retreat, judge, or disappear. But she doesn't flinch, because she's not here to convince anyone of her worth. She's not here to carry someone's unhealed wounds. She's not here to shrink into someone's idea of manageable. She's here to grow, to feel, to love deeply, but only where love is mutual. And so if she's still alone, it's not because she's impossible. It's because she refuses to be optional. She doesn't want a love that fills a void. She wants a love that amplifies the light she's already built inside. And until that comes, she's not waiting in sadness. She's living in strength. So if you ever find yourself drawn to a woman like this, don't be intimidated by her wholeness. Be inspired by it. Because she's not asking for perfect. She's just asking for present. And presence, genuine, grounded, honest presence, is one of the rarest and most powerful gifts you can offer. So the next time you think she's distant, cold, or hard to love, ask yourself, is she hard to love? Or is she just unwilling to be loved in a way that breaks her all over again, and she doesn't want promises? She wants you to show up. Not once, not someday, but now. Carl Jung once said, "The tree that grows to heaven must send its roots to hell." And for many women, especially the ones who've chosen solitude with purpose, that quote isn't just poetic. It's painfully real. Because here's what most people don't see: before she became whole, before she walked tall and stopped explaining her worth, she went through her own private hell. Not the dramatic kind you post on social media. The kind that unfolds in silence. The kind that happens at 2 a.m. when you're staring at the ceiling wondering how you became so disconnected from yourself. The kind where you wake up in someone else's life playing roles you never chose, staying in relationships that chip away at your spirit, one compromise at a time. Her journey didn't start with empowerment. It started with exhaustion, years of emotional labor, years of being too much in the wrong places and not enough in the right ones, years of giving more than she received, years of mistaking patterns for love and chaos for passion. She didn't just wake up one morning and decide I deserve better. No. She crawled out of emotional cycles that had been passed down for generations. She watched herself repeat stories her mother and grandmother never had the language to heal. She stayed too long, apologized too much, accepted crumbs and called it connection. But at some point, after enough breakdowns, enough silent suffering, something inside her cracked open. And it wasn't rage that came out. It was clarity. That quiet voice inside the one she ignored for so long started speaking louder. You weren't born to beg for love. You don't have to keep breaking just to feel needed. This ends with you. And that's when the real journey began. You see, Jung didn't mean hell in the religious sense. He meant the shadow, the unconscious parts of us we bury, deny, avoid. And she went there. She faced the fear of being alone. She sat with the ache of rejection. She untangled the old beliefs that told her she was only lovable if she was useful, pleasing, quiet. She met every ghost that haunted her, every ex, every childhood wound, every inherited trauma. And instead of running, she stayed. She learned that healing isn't a light switch. It's a slow, brutal excavation. It's crying in the shower because you finally admitted to yourself that you were never truly seen. It's realizing that some people only loved you when you played small and walking away from that, even when it hurts. It's looking at the younger version of you with compassion and saying, I'll protect you now. And over time, slowly, tenderly, she stopped settling, not out of pride, but out of integrity. She stopped auditioning for love. She stopped mistaking attention for care. She stopped letting people back in just because they missed her, because now she missed herself more. And the beauty of it all, she didn't become bitter. She became rooted. She didn't build walls. She planted boundaries. She didn't close her heart. She just learned to stop handing it to people who didn't know how to hold it. Her journey wasn't about becoming hard. It was about becoming whole. And whole people don't chase, they attract. They don't force, they flow. They don't explain their worth, they embody it. You might look at her now, calm, radiant, self-contained, and think she's lucky. She has it all figured out. But don't mistake her peace for an easy path. She earned every ounce of it, through nights of self-doubt, through tears that no one saw, through choices that made no sense to others, but felt like freedom to her. She broke the cycle. She stopped inheriting pain and started rewriting her story. And no, it wasn't glamorous. It was raw, messy, lonely at times. But it was real. And now she loves differently. She doesn't need you to complete her, she needs you to meet her. She doesn't want drama, she wants depth. She doesn't crave grand gestures, she watches for consistency. Because she knows what it's like to mistake survival for love. And she refuses to go back to that. So if you see her standing alone, unapologetically, unwaveringly herself, don't assume it was easy. Understand, she grew her roots in hell, so she could reach her own kind of heaven. And she's not asking you to understand her. She's simply inviting you to meet her at the level she now lives on. A level where love isn't begged for, where pain isn't recycled, and where wholeness isn't feared. It's honored. There's a shift happening, quiet, subtle, but undeniable. You may have felt it yourself. A stirring in your gut, a voice whispering beneath the noise of everyday life. It's the rise of a new archetype. She's not the damsel, not the obedient daughter, not the woman waiting at the window hoping someone finally sees her. No, she's something entirely different. She is the sovereign feminine, or what some have called the wild woman. Not wild in recklessness, but in her refusal to be domesticated by society's expectations. She no longer lives to be chosen, she chooses. Her life isn't a performance to attract a partner, it's an expression of her truth. And that truth, it doesn't always look soft, it doesn't always look palatable, but it is real. You see, for centuries, women were taught to find their value through being needed. Be agreeable, be beautiful, be wanted. Entire systems, religious, economic, cultural, were built on the premise that a woman's power came only through association, through marriage, through being someone's something. But what happens when a woman no longer asks to be picked? When she stops waiting for a seat at the table and builds her own, it sends shockwaves. Because society doesn't know what to do with a woman who doesn't seek permission. She doesn't flirt for validation. She doesn't compete for attention. She doesn't shapeshift to fit into rooms that never saw her clearly in the first place. She walks in with presence. She speaks with intention. And she chooses not just people, but experiences, environments, energy. Her discernment is sharp. Her time is sacred. Her standards are non-negotiable. And that, quite frankly, makes people nervous. Because for so long, control over women was rooted in their desire to be chosen. What happens when that desire dissolves? When she realizes she doesn't need external approval to feel complete, she becomes free. And free women disrupt everything. They disrupt industries built on insecurity. They disrupt traditions built on silence. They disrupt relationships built on codependency. Carl Jung believed that we are all shaped by archetypes, unconscious templates of behavior and identity. And for generations, the dominant feminine archetype was the self-sacrificing caregiver, or the beautiful muse always orbiting someone else's story. But this woman, she is the main character of her own myth. She's no longer the supporting role in a man's redemption arc. She's the author of her own evolution. And she doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. In fact, it's her silence that unsettles people the most. Because her stillness is not emptiness. It's awareness. It's sovereignty. It's the quiet confidence of someone who has walked through fire, survived, and decided not to return to what burned her. Her presence alone challenges people who are still performing. She's not trying to be impressive. She's being authentic. And in a world addicted to appearances, that kind of authenticity is revolutionary. So when she declines the invitation to prove herself, when she doesn't explain her choices, when she prioritizes peace over popularity, the system starts to glitch. Because she's not playing by the rules of validation anymore. She's not waiting for a fairy tale. She's building a reality, one that's rooted in freedom, self-awareness, and spiritual alignment. And that scares those who still believe a woman's power must be softened, managed, or explained. Let me ask you something. Have you ever met a woman who didn't need to be saved, but didn't want to save you either? Who wasn't interested in fixing you, impressing you, or being someone you could project onto? A woman who just was. That's her. That's the archetype. She no longer asks, "Am I enough for you?" She simply asks, "Are you enough for yourself?" Because if not, she's not here to carry you. She's not here to teach you what you refuse to learn. She's not here to bleed for a connection you haven't earned. This is not ego. It's alignment. She has become so clear on who she is that she no longer accepts anything that pulls her away from it. And the most powerful part, she's not angry. She's not vengeful. She's peaceful, rooted, liberated. That's what makes her so hard to control. You can't manipulate someone who no longer needs your approval. You can't guilt-trip someone who has made peace with walking alone. You can't seduce someone who is already fulfilled. This is the new feminine archetype. She's not loud. She's not perfect. She's not interested in playing small just to be liked. She is sovereign. She is wild. And she is rewriting the rules one unapologetic choice at a time. Here's something we don't talk about enough. Oh, Steve, some women aren't looking for love that fills an emptiness inside them. They're not seeking someone to fix, rescue, or complete them. They're not chasing a fairy tale. They're choosing something far more powerful, a soul alliance. And if that sounds unfamiliar, that's because it's not the kind of love we're taught to expect. We're raised on stories where love arrives with fireworks, a grand rescue, or a dramatic kiss in the rain. We're told that when the right person comes along, everything broken will suddenly be okay. But she's not buying that anymore, because she's already spent years learning to hold herself through the storm. She's rebuilt from heartbreak. She's faced silence, disappointment, and the slow ache of realizing someone who said, "I love you," only loved the idea of her. So no, she doesn't want love that fills a void. She wants love that overflows, a connection that begins with wholeness, not dependence. A love where both people come to the table already full, so what they give each other isn't out of lack, but abundance. This is the kind of love that doesn't beg, barter, or perform. It simply exists. Quiet, honest, deep. And yes, this kind of love is rare, because it demands a level of self-awareness that most people never reach. It requires two people who have done the inner work, not perfect, but conscious. Not unscarred, but present. She doesn't need you to fix her. She needs you to see her. Not just when she's glowing, but when she's quiet, when she withdraws, when her silence says more than her words ever could. Because here's the thing, her silence isn't emptiness. It's a boundary. It's a form of strength. It's a sanctuary she built when noise stopped making her feel seen. There was a time she would have mistaken silence for rejection. She would have filled the space with over-explaining, over-giving, overstaying. But now her silence is intentional. It's not the absence of feeling, it's the protection of peace. Because when you've spent enough time healing yourself, you stop inviting people who speak loudly but say nothing. She no longer needs constant attention to feel valued. She no longer wants dramatic gestures that fade the next day. She craves resonance, presence, soul truth. You might not see her chasing love, but that doesn't mean she's stopped believing in it. In fact, she believes in it more deeply than most. So deeply she refuses to settle for anything shallow. And yes, that scares people, because she's not easy to impress anymore. You can't just show up with charm and a good story. She's listening to your energy. She's watching how you handle her truth. She wants a love that moves with intention, not impulse. That walks with her, not ahead of her. That sees the sacred, not just the beautiful. She's not looking for a partner to complete her. She's already complete. She's looking for someone to create with, to grow beside, to challenge and be challenged by, to build something with depth. She wants alignment, not attachment. And that's what makes her different. Because we live in a world where love is often confused with escape, where people fall into relationships because they're tired of being alone, not because they're ready to share a life. But this woman, she's not afraid of being alone. She's afraid of losing herself again, and she won't do it. Not for comfort, not for company, not even for chemistry. Because she's done the work. She knows what it costs to stay in love that isn't rooted in truth. And so she'll wait. Not passively, not longingly, but actively living, creating, growing, loving herself in the way she once begged others to. And when love comes, it won't feel like rescue. It'll feel like recognition. Not you complete me, but I see you, all of you. And I choose you, not because I need to, but because I want to. That's the kind of love she holds space for. A love that doesn't shrink her, that doesn't demand she silence her intuition or soften her edges to be accepted. She's not asking for perfection. She's asking for presence, for depth, for soul-level honesty. She wants to be met, not managed, respected, not rescued, challenged, not controlled. And until that love comes, she's okay. Not lonely, not bitter, just in alignment. Because when a woman chooses herself this completely, she becomes the kind of person who can only be loved completely. Not halfway, not part-time, not conditionally. So if she walks alone right now, it's not because she's given up on love. It's because she's waiting for love that's finally ready to rise to meet her. So if you've made it this far, take a breath. Because maybe now you see it. The woman who walks alone isn't broken. She isn't lost. She's not what society calls a failure in love. She's the evidence that emotional freedom is possible, that healing is possible, that wholeness doesn't require a witness, only the courage to face yourself. This isn't about rejecting love. It's about refusing to betray yourself in the name of it. Because her journey is not isolation, it's individuation, in the words of Carl Jung. The sacred return to her most honest, most unfiltered self. And that kind of return, it's revolutionary. It changes how she loves, how she speaks, how she walks through the world, no longer waiting for validation, but moving in alignment. So if something in this story stirred something in you, don't ignore it. Maybe it's a memory. Maybe it's a mirror. Maybe it's a part of you that's ready to wake up too. And if this message touched something within you, don't keep it to yourself. Let it echo. Like this video. Leave a comment. Subscribe not out of impulse, but as a conscious choice to keep growing, thinking, and becoming. Because this isn't just a video. It's a reminder that walking alone isn't weakness. It's where the real journey begins.